Welcome to this Euronet Plus debate on Brexit, the United Kingdom's referendum on membership of the European Union. Our programme today is presented within the Citizens' Corner concept. The debate is produced and hosted by Euronet Plus and Italy's Radio 24, a member of the Euronet Plus network. The debate can be followed live from the European Parliament on our Euronet Plus Inside website, on our Facebook profile, as well as on Twitter using the hashtag Citizens' Corner. I'm Brian Maguire. Joining us today to discuss the implications of the Brexit vote, Catherine Stihler, a UK MEP with the Social Democrats, Vice Chair of the Committee on the Internal Market and Consumer Protection. Green MEP, Jean Lambert, also from the United Kingdom, Chair of the Delegation of the countries of South Asia. Italian Social Democrat MEP Mercedes Bresso, Member of the Committee on Constitutional Affairs. United Left MEP Martina Anderson, representing the North of Ireland. And Luca, Jahier, President of the various interest groups at the European Economic and Social Committee. And Dora Francesco, Director of Vote Watch Europe. Welcome to all of you. We're also joined by students from our university campus networks, Marta Kielo from Poland and Blanca Pinheiro from Spain. Martina, let's start with you. How do you feel the Brexit vote's going to go?
My concern is more to do with the discussion at this stage as opposed to the vote, because I think the focus has been solely on, particularly in England. And in the north of Ireland, we're very concerned that they have almost been eradicated from the conversation. Now, as someone coming from the north of Ireland, we're very used to the British government totally disregarding the needs of the wishes of the people who are there. But when you consider the 10% of the North's GDP comes from Europe, we are net beneficiaries in terms of the contribution that is made to Europe. And some people say, well, the British government makes a net contribution, and they do, but quite clearly the constituency I care about most is my own. And as net beneficiaries of the EU, not just financial beneficiaries, but also with regards to consumer rights, human rights, social rights, all of the rights and protections that we do not believe would be replaced by a British government, we are concerned that the whole focus in this debate is on England. Now, that said, what we have said, and we have joined with Scotland and Wales, is that there should be a separate referendum, should be counted separately in England and Scotland and Wales, and therefore the vote, for instance, in the north of Ireland should be respected, because the north of Ireland has been partitioned, and the six-county economy, as I would call it, six-county in the north of Ireland, has had a disastrous relationship with England with regards to its economy since it has been partitioned, and there's figures there to demonstrate how we were doing before partition and how we are doing now.
Catherine, you're from Scotland. How's this playing in Scotland?
Well, we are out there campaigning day in and day out. We've got, 29 days to go roughly until the referendum day. Turnout is going to be absolutely critical. We know that there are age differentiations about preferences. On saying that, I know that in Scotland, recent polling showed that 76% of people in Scotland wanted us to remain in the EU, but put that to one side, the only poll that matters is on referendum day. So we have to go out and make the positive case. 250,000 jobs in Scotland are reliant on our exports to the European Union, to the single market. We know that our social rights are dependent on our membership of the European Union, maternity leave, paid holiday leave, health and safety at work. And we know that we have influence. The UK has a seat at the top table of MEPs, a commissioner, and also the government and the Council of Ministers to go to if there's ever a problem. If we do not have that, we will lose our influence. And I keep saying the alternative to what we have is to walk away, have no say, but still have to pay to trade. And that's not something I relish.
Jean, in your constituency, do you think that this is focusing more on immigration or on the economy, and do you think the argument's been well made at the moment?
Well, of course, I represent London, and we all know that in many ways London often comes across as a different country.
It is.
Sort of sympathy there with the Scots. And, but certainly I think that the way that the debate is playing in England at the moment is a lot of people see it as a shouting match. With almost, who can make the most outrageous claim today. So I'm not sure quite how much it's engaging people, but it does seem to be at least having something of an effect in the polls. And it's becoming very much an economy sort of for the Remain side, versus certainly free movement and immigration. Okay. And it's being framed as immigration. So that has, I think, a lot of implications for, I don't know, inter-community relations after the referendum, not just during it.
Okay. As an Italian watching this, Mercedes, how do you perceive the debate as in terms of content at the moment? And do you think it's balanced? Do you think the right arguments are being made?
I think it's balanced, but from my point of view as Italian, as a pro-European, is too much about economic effect of to stay or to leave. In this case, I think it's very clear that to stay is better. The problem is more political, I feel, and so I think that also in the debate, other points, other subjects should be discussed. For example, the question of security, the problem of migrants, we can solve only together. So we are trying the proposal now to have a big project to help African countries and to help them to control the flux of migrants are possible only together. Each of us can't do this alone. So I think that other subjects could be in the debate, made in the debate, and to help citizens also to understand other points, security, the future, the role of Europe in the world. It's only together that we can count in the world. And so why we don't think to go out of the NATO? Because the NATO is important for all of us. And I think the same is for the European Union. This is a subject perhaps to be more discussed in also in the UK debate.
Okay. Luca, you've been following the polls for some time in this. Well, what's your impression? What's changed?
What's changed in the polls? But I think that there is some change that with a slow moving for the remain instead to the leave. But you know, the polls in the last in many countries. I don't know if perhaps in UK are much more correct, the polls. I see in my country, all around Europe, sometimes you have also to listen very, very carefully. I think that there are major division in UK for what I can see. It depends even in the trade unions movement. They are quite divided. Even between the different four nations, there are important division of perspective. So there are several lines of development of this. But I think that I fully share what Mrs. Bresso was saying, that I would even add something more, because even on the debate on the economic issue, it seems that there is an ideological debate instead of a consistent debate about how many employment will be lost, how much that will be cost realistic to stay in the internal market, being out of the European Union, how much we will lose in the 400 multinational of UK that are working in the internal market. So is we will have for sure advantage. We are paying too much. So it is yes, it's economic issue, but it's an ideological approach in the economic. But for sure, there are other questions that need to be discussed. So for example, I was in some meetings that I was organizing in Manchester a few times ago, and I was shocked that the debate on the sovereignty was coming a sort of an ideological debate in some case. Instead of taking in account that the UK today is member of the European Union, of course, but it's also member of a lot of other international organizations, WTO, EMF, World Bank, United Nations, NATO, where the passage of sovereignty is quite important. It's the NATO decide that military intervention is decided. It's not the Buckingham Palace that can stop
You'll be
this.
pleased to know there's a really excellent infographic to illustrate we actually have much more say, and it's a much democratic organisation, the European Union, than any of the
other.
institutions you
The IMF,
mentioned.
the World Bank.
With the strong role of British people.
Okay.
That is not discussed. That's make me assured that.
Let me ask bring Dora in here. You're watching these polls carefully. Do you see what we just discussed, that there is something more of an ideological battle rather than a policy discussion, or is this driven by emotion or reason?
It depends on the sides. I think that what we've seen is that one of the sides is appealing more to the emotions, and the other side is appealing more to reason. And it is still difficult to say which one of them is doing a better job. I'm saying that the side campaigning for Brexit is trying to appeal to emotions as much as possible, and to those in-depth emotions that, you know, the fear of migration and all of that. whereas the side that campaigns for the UK to stay in plays the cards, the economic cards, and the
Is there
internal
kind of
market
fear
cards as much as possible.
It's not an emotional argument as well. You stay or you lose everything is basically the narrative.
It is, but I think the economic narrative is a bit more difficult to sell, at least at this point. Probably when things will get closer to the date of the referendum, as it happened in the case of the referendum in Scotland, people who care more about the economy would also pay more attention to these things because, frankly speaking, people who are more busy with businesses have less time to pay to actually listening to the debate so far. They will only be concerned about this when things will go to the final few days of it. And I think that will make the difference, that the people who are really concerned about the economy and that the businesses will come to vote.
Okay.
And if they do, they
let's
will
come
make
back
a
in a
difference.
moment to the voting intentions. I'll bring one of our students in. Let's see. Blanca, what have you got?
Thank you. Welcome. First of all, and according to the last February agreement, I would like to know which are the decisive conditions for the competitiveness question, the sovereignty question, and the Schengen treaty if Britain finally gets out from the European Union due to this referendum expected to be in June. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's start with Martina, then we'll go to Catherine for this as well. Martina, your position is maybe a little different than others because of where the north of Ireland is, and your party being an all-Ireland party with Sinn Féin as well. Is that how do you see these risks? First of all, Schengen, Ireland's part of Schengen, United Kingdom isn't. The economic links between Ireland and the United Kingdom as well are exceptionally strong. How does this play in Ireland in general?
I went to London and I spoke to a number of MEPs and others who have been involved in this debate, and I was alarmed to discover that there's no consideration being given, or very little consideration being given to the fact we have just emerged from conflict. Here in this Parliament, they've given Peace 1, Peace 2, Peace 3, Peace 4 to Ireland as a contribution to assist us with consolidating the peace. We have had partition. It has been shocking. It has tore our economy apart and our people. Our economic performance in the north is shocking compared to the 26 counties. And we have an experience where people, 18,000, travel across the border to work or to study. 5,200 students cross the border to study. And bad enough as partition is, what's it going to be like with an EU border stuck right in the heart of Ireland? And I'm asking people, MEPs and others, waking up to the implications that this is going to have for our country. We are trying our damnedest and our hardest to consolidate a peace process. We are getting assistance from Europe to do so. CAP is the sole competency of Europe. We have a strong agricultural policy or farming community in the north. We have got a basket case economy. We are dependent on 3.5 billion. These sound shocks. These are facts coming into the north. And if Britain was to pull out, and a consequence of England pulling out, it wags its finger at the north of Ireland and pulls us out too. So our sovereignty in terms of, for instance, Interreg funding is one of the funding that allows us to become an Ireland that's truly integrational. So therefore we can have projects that aren't back to back, that we can advance our all-Ireland agenda. I'm an Irish Republican, very proud Irish Republican. I want our country united. And to think that partition is bad enough, that we're going to have a border, and some people in Britain, even the British Secretary of State, tried to tell us there's not going to be a border. So we're going to have the 26 counties going to have the free movement of people and the 6 counties not. So I am asking MEPs, will please people waken up to the implications that this is going to have in Ireland as a country that is emerging from conflict and as a country that needs the members of the European Parliament to ensure that whatever happens in England, and with all due respect to London, it's up to you. It's up to you. If England votes to pull out, see if Ireland votes to stay in the 6 counties, then stay in, we should.
Okay, let's bring Scotland as well. This basically guarantees Scottish independence if Britain votes to leave, doesn't it?
Well, not necessarily. I think that's a big assumption, and in fact, polls just now are very against that prospect. And as you know, I'm not for an independent Scotland. I'm for maintaining being part of the United Kingdom. I think what's interesting. I was in a debate yesterday, and someone was making the comment that this debate seems to, be very long, and it's been happening for a long time. And I thought, well, in Scotland, it was 2 years that we had before we had our referendum. Actually seems very quick, these 29 days we're about to approach. And then we... Sorry. And then when we consider that we've got 29 days to that referendum, it is not a long time at all. So I think that we all have a responsibility. I think you've got a particular situation, Martina, that I think the other MEPs in your area are not for us remaining in. In Scotland, obviously, we have 6 MEPs, and I think 1 is for us to come out. In fact, I think there's going to be a debate in the Scottish Parliament actually on Thursday, and there's very few MSPs that want us to come out. So for me, it's about motivating people to come out and put, yes, you can put the head argument, the economic argument, of course, because jobs are reliant, that's absolutely sure. But you also have to put the passionate argument about the European Union being the most successful peace process the world has ever known. We're part of something bigger, and to be part of something bigger, we can work together, and putting that issue about solidarity, working together, what we gain from that. And I think that's something in the next 29 days we have to hear more from the Remain inside about the passion, about why we're committed to being part of something that is bigger than us, and what advantages we get from that cooperation.
Jean, did David Cameron's deal make any difference to this discussion at all?
Well, I think it's very interesting how little David Cameron's deal has actually been part of the discussion.
It's not talked about at all, is it, Jean? It's not talked
about. I think, obviously the Leave side have totally dismissed it as being inconsequential. And I think because this is something which, in a sense, is almost not about the detail. That even those of us who are campaigning, to remain in, certainly have political differences. They'll all be business as usual on June the 24th, possibly. But, that this is really such a huge decision that if you like, those sort of the details of it are not the core of it.
That's right.
But I thoroughly agree with what Martina was saying about the issues for Northern Ireland have been barely touched on.
The human rights issues in particular to do with legislation as well. How's that going to... Maybe we'll come back to that in a moment, actually.
The human rights side of it, well, there's still this confusion in the UK anyway between, what the Council of Europe does and what the European Union does. So a lot of the stuff about sort of coming out of the European Convention on Human Rights and so on and so forth is, there is this confusion with the two different parts. And again, I'm interested that has not played such a major part in it. It's economy and immigration.
Okay. Martha, you got a question for the panel?
Good morning. I have a question. If Great Britain really go out from European Union, what happened with students from another country who study in the United Kingdom? Question. And what happened with the Erasmus program?
Mercedes.
The Erasmus program will be stopped, this is sure. I think that students will continue to go to Britain, but with their own money and financed by their own family. Because after we have to negotiate a new treaty, in this treaty it could be possible, as in Switzerland, that the United Kingdom pays for its students be able to participate to Erasmus, but they will pay all the fees for their students, as a Switzerland made in this moment.
Luca, what else would stop? Was it just going to be Erasmus, or we're going to face a whole battalion of chaos?
It's not only Erasmus.
Yes.
Also, is also a dramatic situation for research. I am in the Swiss in the Interparliamentary Assembly together with Switzerland, Norway, and Liechtenstein, and so on. And for them, is absolutely dramatic. They are asking to pay but be able to stay in the research community, because the European research community
And
is a
also
very
for-
strong one.
Also for the recognition, the
That's
mutual
right.
recognition of
Absolutely.
the title of study at
That's
any
right,
level, the Bologna
and
process.
the common project.
mean,
Common project. Now the projects are very, very big, so you need to be together with the other
For
institutions.
Scotland alone, our European research money for last year was 88.8 million across the universities across
Yes.
Scotland. That's
Yes.
13% of our research funding is at risk
Yes,
if we
yes.
come out.
And you should pay all just to stay together. This is why it's very clear that a new treaty will be less favorable than the actual situation. This is, I think, is evident, and it's becoming more and more evident to people. I think that is one of the reasons
Doro,
of the changing.
let's look at the polls now in a bit more detail. Doro, when you see these shifts in the polling, the trend was at the start of the whole campaign, Remain was winning handily, and then it's narrowed substantially. And now we seem to be seeing it tracking back in favour of Remain. What would you look at in these polls? Would you favour online polling? Would you favour the phone polling? What do you trust?
Well, I think it's been going back and forth for the past few months at least. Certainly, I would feel more comfortable believing the underground polls rather the online or phone polls. But given the track record of polls in the last couple of years all across Europe, it is very difficult to reach a conclusion at this stage, particularly when the gap between the two is so close. So I think at this point it's everybody's guess. The gap is too close to call. And I think that is going to be problematic whichever the result eventually goes. It's whatever the decision will have to be made, it will be based on a very small majority. And we see this kind of problematic scrutinies all across Europe. We just have to think of the Austrian elections, which have been won by the, let's call it, the pro-EU candidate with a very, very small margin. And this still raises a question of legitimacy there. It's the case in other EU countries as well.
Okay. Catherine, the Scottish referendum debate was a shock for everybody except the Conservative Party and Lynton Crosby in particular. The polling and the way that the polls were conducted has changed a lot. Do you trust any of it?
I think that the only poll that matters is the 23rd of June. And what I think is that we have to get people out to vote.
Do you think
voter
yesterday's-
registration's
do you-
really... to be honest, at the moment, I just think voter registration, we've got until the 7th of June. And I was saying about the age differentiation, a lot of students are graduating round about the 23rd of June. In fact, Glastonbury starts, I think, on the 22nd of June. Fortunately, the organiser of Glastonbury has sent, I think, a voter application, a registration form to every person that's attending, which is great. But I think this is really important that people are registered, because if students are not registered that want to vote and they're maybe away from the university or they're graduating and don't have a proxy or a postal vote, these are the practicalities of what we're about on the 23rd of June. And I think we just have to push making sure everybody who wants to vote is registered to vote on the 7th of June.
We also have a mini plenary here on the 23rd of June.
I know.
You know, this is madness. I'm trying to, I've actually circulated a letter today to get support from the MEPs and others to try to see if we can get voting on the Wednesday so that we can all be in our respective constituencies to try to mobilise and get people out to vote.
To be honest, Martina, I don't think there should be any mini plenary
no,
that week
I
at
agree with you.
all.
I agree with you. But at least if there's an argument for one, which I would concur with you, we should try and
Well, what
get it
Catherine said
moved.
about the Rock the Vote in America, for example, getting people out, mobilising, and Sinn Féin has a reputation as being a formidable election machine. And do you think that Lynton Crosby has understood the narrative correctly at the moment? He's saying today in the Telegraph, for example, that the Brexit have blown it. Basically, they haven't articulated well what they should have been going after, and the Tories have changed the narrative and gone after what should have been Brexit territory. How do you see it?
Well, a bit like Catherine, I think the only vote that does matter, obviously, is on the day. But I think I would take a wee bit exception to what Catherine says, that we have to go out and try and sell all that is good about Europe. And of course, we're all here, and I'm talking about the economic benefits, social benefits, the human rights benefits. But we also have to talk about the democratic deficit as well. And I think for those that have got concerns about the leave, I think they need to hear from most of us that want to remain that we also want to reform. for those of us who do want to reform the EU. It is in badly need of reform. Look what happened to the Troika. Look what it did to Ireland. Look at the bailout conditions. Look what happened to Greece. People are looking at the power of unelected officials, about the Commission, and I think the Commission itself, there is a democratic deficit. So Sinn Féin, we've been very clear since we've come to the European Parliament. We critically engage. We will assess everything that passes our desk as to how it's going to benefit the people we represent or not. And I think that those who want to leave would benefit from hearing us being a bit more critical and actually promoting what we need to do to bring about and advance the changes. I think one of the things that was mentioned about the Human Rights Act, the British government has been very clever in one sense, because it has said for a long time in its manifesto that it was going to repeal the Human Rights Act. But now it has moved it off the table a little bit, because we all know it's part of the disengagement from Europe that it wants. But for the Tory administration, and all this really is about because they are split, that half of them realise that half of them want to remain, and I want to put on the record, I want to remain for completely different reasons. I have nothing in common with David Cameron, thank God, and I don't think I ever will. But they have boxed and put away in a corner the scrapping of the Human Rights Act until after this, because he didn't want to send out a confused message, because he wants to scrap the Human Rights Act because they have an ideological aversion to the accountability mechanism that is brought in by the European Court of Human Rights.
Okay, Luca.
Following this reflection, perhaps two elements has also to be underlined. One is sort of paradox or contradiction that, as I was saying in the debate before, the most Eurosceptic leader of UK after Margaret Thatcher now is the campaigner for the stay in the European Union, because Cameron has always been, since he was very young, a very Eurosceptic and never convinced in the Tories constituency, has never been a pro-European. So it's a sort of paradox that perhaps has to be explained. I think there is also political convenience as all the political bargaining, but this means something is one that all his life has spent to criticize and to find argument to go out, now is in. The second one that perhaps has to be explained, and I am saying this as Italian because we have been historically absolutely less capable to influence at this level, that UK staying in has always had an enormous capacity for the quality, for also the autonomy of your country, and also for the quality of your staff, of your member, of your technician, or your to influence the concrete decision in the European process. Always an enormous influence. If you will stay out, you will, in any case, try to negotiate for sure a lot of things, because if you will not, the major company in the stock exchange in London will go to Dublin, not to go to Frankfurt, you will negotiate some status for the city of London to become. Yeah. So without any capacity to influence so there's also another narrative to say, how have we been historically capable to influence staying in?
And
if you stay out,
what language will we speak? Because you have no cabin, no English cabin.
Well, the Maltese
no,
also
there will be
the language, don't they?
It's not because no. Now Ireland
the Maltese
has its own cabin, so we don't have any country speaking English except you. So this is a fantastic subject.
The common language of EU.
But we have to change our strategy.
Let me just bring to Catherine about Sadiq Khan. Sadiq Khan was elected easily in London. London being a particular constituency where the inner city, the centre of London is pro-European essentially, and the further out from the centre you go becomes more in favour of Leave. Do you think Sadiq Khan has come just at the right moment? He's part of your party, where there was division in the Labour Party, there was no clear leadership speaking out for the left, and now he's flying the European flag outside the mayoral headquarters in London.
Well, I was very happy with the result in London on a night in Scotland where my party didn't do so well in Scotland, so the London result was a fantastic win, and he will be a fantastic mayor for London, I think. And I think what's happening in this debate, now that we have the Scottish elections out, the mayoral elections, the focus obviously is on this referendum, and we have to ensure, I think that people who are undecided want information. We have to make sure that people have the information at their fingertips and it's neutral information. I also think that it's not just about the MEPs going out, it's everybody. It's everybody's referendum. It's not just our referendum. And I think that sometimes I think it's a stronger case for people who are not involved in the institutions, who genuinely believe the gains in local communities. Last week, I was out in the Outer Hebrides looking at how European funding has made a difference to one of the most peripheral areas in the whole of the European Union. And that was a fantastic moment to look at the difference we've made. And I think those kind of things, the next 29 days, the people's stories about how Europe's made a difference on a practical level in local communities is the best way we can put forward a positive case.
To humanise the story.
It does.
Okay, let's bring our students back in again. Marta, you got another question?
I have one. If are any pro for Unite Europe when Great Britain go out?
Okay.
Any pro?
Is there any advantage in Britain going out?
I think that it will be for us a strong risk to have Britain out for democracy, because it's one of the international champion of democracy and historically. So this is the problem. In favor, it will be very difficult for each of other European countries a bit Eurosceptical to ask for a different status, because it will be clear that the risk is to go out and to take all the risk or the problem to being out of the European Union. So this will put Europe more together, Europeans more together. But I don't want to pay this price, honestly.
Do you see any advantage in the UK leaving?
I don't see any advantages, but I would just like to highlight the risks which are not only for the British, but they're also for the rest of the EU, because we're not all British, we're also coming from the remaining 27 member states. And I think that there will be complex implications in the sense that there is already a fair level of dissatisfaction in some other member states with some segments of the populations who may be taken advantage of if in the case of a Brexit. I'm talking about the fact that some other countries may want to, or sections of the population in some other countries may want to renegotiate their membership of the EU and may want to push for opt-outs. And some people may be disappointed thinking that one key member of the European club leaves the EU. Then there would be good reasons for some to say, well, maybe we should renegotiate or even exit the EU as well. I'm talking about some countries in the south, some countries in Eastern Europe, particularly the ones in Eastern Europe who have joined the EU only 10 years ago, hoping that this is going to be a long-term solid project. And now when they see that a key member wants to leave, they would obviously ask themselves some questions. Okay. So there's a big risk.
Let's bring Blanca. You have another question?
The last one would be about the health coverage for the British citizens around the European Union, and in the other side for the European citizens in Great Britain.
Let's broaden this a bit to social rights. Jean, health coverage, what happens for UK citizens if they leave the European Union? What happens for EU migrant workers in the UK?
Yes, I mean, I think it's not clear what would happen, and I think that this is one of the big questions. Certainly, there, for example, for the 300,000 UK nationals living in Spain, that of course for some people already have to have independent health insurance. If you're not economically active, but I think that this is going to be one of the areas for discussion. That ironically we're negotiating a social security agreement with Turkey, so maybe we can learn some lessons from what we put in that. But this is going to be, I think, quite a complex thing, particularly if we're not having free movement alongside it. Because what we also have from the UK is that for people in certain parts of the world, for example, their pension entitlements are frozen, that they don't go up with the rate of inflation as they do, if it's somewhere within the European Union. So I think this is going to be an extremely complicated question to unpick, along with sort of students' rights and so on. I mean, because we UK students also would lose their right, for example, to study elsewhere in the EU, where maybe they're not having to pay tuition fees, like they do in England and Wales.
Okay, Luca.
I think that one of the most dangerous issue concerning this issue that concern person, but any other issue, it will be the level and the lengthness of uncertainty. You start in a system where you know with the weak and the strong issue where you are, whether you're right, in a system where you don't know what,
For a long period.
for a long period. So that will be, because no one will say it will be stopped the day after. From the 1st of July, everything will be stopped. And after, which negotiation will be started first? The right for health, or the right for the company, or the right for the city, or the right for the workers? So you will enter in a chaotic period that for person, for company, it will be not clear. Perhaps in 5 years we will reach in many subjects interesting.
We have 2 years. 2 years.
Well, let me bring this question to Martina first.
But 2 years
In terms of inward investment, for example,
Otherwise we
how can
stop.
you get any sort of inward investment when there's so much uncertainty in the event of a Brexit?
Well, I think the concerns that are out there is the kind of concerns a business dread because of the uncertainty. They don't know what's going to happen. But Article 50 says that the EU must negotiate an exit. But it says that it must take account of the future framework of the future relationship, but it doesn't say that it must set the future relationship. And there's a guillotine in Article 50 that enables the British government to pull out, a clause that allows them to pull out immediately if they don't like the conditions that will be set. And let's be very clear about this. The Commission will set the conditions. They will set the negotiation without the British government being around the table. It'll be the 27 member states. They will set the conditions for the negotiations. And for instance, they could say that in order for the British government to get access to the single market, or to Britain to get access to the single market, it must respect and comply with European court rulings, and it must allow free movement of people.
Okay, Catherine.
This is the minimum. This is
Yeah, the minimum.
The
We've-
minimum.
Sure.
Look at this negotiation with Switzerland. Huh?
Yeah.
It's a small country. With
Yeah.
a big country, you need absolutely to negotiate at this.
Okay.
And they still have to
First
pay.
point.
So
Yeah,
the British
yeah.
government is still going to be payers, but no
Yeah.
longer
Yeah.
players.
That's right.
Catherine, do you think there'll be a negotiation
to decide.
2.0 after this as well, as Boris Johnson was accused of playing for the next round rather than playing for this round in particular?
No, I think the decision will be made on the 23rd of June, and I will do everything I can for us to remain in. I also want a reformed European Union, but the best way to reform is to remain as a full member at the top table. And I think that the more you look at this, I mean, you said it, Martina, that the fact is that what the Leave want is for us to walk away from our closest neighbours and friends, to have no say but still have to pay to trade. And I looked at statistics about Norway, and they pay actually more now, I think, per head than we do, and we have a say. So I just think that that is the rational economic argument, but the passionate argument is better to be part of something with our closest neighbours, with our closest friends, and work together to solve our common problems.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left. Let's focus on the polling and motivations for this as well. Yesterday's Austria result, do you think that this, Doro, do you think this will motivate those people who may be a little complacent about voting to actually get out and vote, saying that every vote really does matter?
I think so, yes. I think that the elections in Austria have proven the fact that every vote can count, and the difference there was extremely small, something that nobody had expected. In fact, as you know, it was the votes which were sent by post that made the difference. And this is not the single case, but it's very interesting that it happened now, just 1 month away from the British referendum, because it emphasizes that effectively very small groups of people can make the difference, and I think this is a very good case for motivating the people in the UK to go to vote from wherever they are, as long as they are registered and they fulfill all the criteria. I think the elections in Austria have come and the result, the close result there has come at a very good point in time.
Okay.
You have also a negative example on the opposite, the Polish example. Because it's true that the actual government has won the election, but also true that the other has lost a lot of voters that simply didn't want to vote.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the campaign to push people to go to vote, it will be most important than any other. because
Mercedes, what would you do? We need some short answers now. So what would you do to get people out to vote?
I will tell them that in this very difficult world, we Europeans need to stay together. And if Britons is right, will be with us, it will be better.
Okay, Jean, when you look at London, do you think London is a better indication of the future of United Kingdom in general in terms of the cosmopolitan mix, the capacity to integrate?
I would love to think it is, and certainly, I mean, we have other big cities that work very well, you know, where people really do the work. And I think one of the things that we're saying in terms of you know, getting people to think about how they're voting is that, you know, if you're looking at the UK situation, you're worried about pressure on services. Well, you know, we've got 1 million public sector jobs going. We've got cuts in local authority spending. You know, that has an effect on services, doesn't it? Well before sort of migrants, many of whom are helping to provide those services. So London's got a positive argument there as well.
Martina, if this is a Remain vote, does this end the argument completely? Do people start to take a look at places like London and say, we got to adjust our community, we got to adjust our country to make it more effective in the modern world?
No, I think it doesn't. I think that the whole politics of England, Scotland and Wales and Ireland has changed, and it's changed utterly as a result of this. And I don't think it's going to be going back to business as usual. I think each of us will be looking at our respective places. We certainly will be looking for a border poll in Ireland. I think there's a growing realisation in Ireland about the implications and the impact of partition, what it has done to our economy. People are looking at how much better off we would be in an all-Ireland context. And of course, we have got a substantive sector of people in the north of Ireland that want to remain. But what we have to do is to persuade people to move towards the unity of our country. And I think that regardless of what happens on the 23rd, one way or another, we certainly in Ireland will be looking at how Ireland would be better off if we could rule ourselves, govern ourselves and take ourselves forward as a single unit.
Catherine, the idea of a single unit as a Conservative Party after this seems wishful thinking. Do you think that the Conservative Party becomes more like the American Republican Party and tears itself apart, or will there be a unification after the referendum?
That's not for me to speculate on.
Go ahead,
we'll see. We will see what happens. But there's certainly the divisions within the British Conservative Party, which have been there for a number of years. The wound has certainly been opened, and it will be up to that party to determine how it heals that wound. But I think that it has pretty much divided that party, and they will obviously have to deal with that situation.
Is there a size of a win which just settles this for a generation?
Well, I think that a win is a win, even if it's 1%. Yes, that's true. But I think what I would like to see is a good 60% of people going out and making sure they vote to remain in that referendum.
Okay, I've got to wrap up now to a summary of what we've just discussed. The 60%, the Ipsos Mori poll on the 15th, 17th of May has Remain at 60% and Leave on 40%. The ORB poll published between the 18th and 22nd of May has 56% for Remain and 44% for Leave, which is pretty much where we started 2 years ago. And the key question is turnout. Can we get people to the polls, and what will they do when they get there? Who's actually going to go to the polls in the end, even if we get a large turnout? What we discussed today is what happens to the regions of England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, its impact on the Republic of Ireland, its close neighbour as well. Do we see an export economy simply collapse and social rights along with it after in the event of a Brexit? And is this being led by emotion or reason? Is this an ideological debate which is getting a good airing of all the arguments, or is this simply something based on the emotions of immigration and the fear of financial loss? There's also a risk to the Northern Irish peace process as well, and so much European money, time, investment has been made in this for a generation now. All that is at risk also. Scotland, the rush for independence slowed, but will it take on a new pace again in the event of a Brexit vote? Will this tear apart the United Kingdom completely? And what happens to Erasmus? Our students all across Europe, will the UK students be able to participate? Will Europe's students be able to stay within the UK? And science and research, 13% of research funding in Scotland comes from the European Union. Can that momentum be sustained? And what happens to the global knowledge, the cloud of knowledge that Europe brings to the United Kingdom? Can that be sustained? The implications for human rights Rights Act, and for Northern Ireland in particular with this as well, can Britain maintain a high standard of human rights integration within the European context as well if it chooses to leave the European Union, and the influence of the UK in Europe. Chambers of Commerce here, they said last week as well that Britain has a huge influence, punches way above its weight, and that maybe the public just don't perceive this. Will Britain lose out for its economy simply because it is not at the negotiating table? Social benefits, healthcare insurance, who will actually have healthcare once they leave the United Kingdom? And if you're working in the United Kingdom, what will happen to your pension as well? Uncertainty across all these levels, but particularly to do with investment. Who would dare invest for 5, 10, 15 years within the United Kingdom in the event of a negotiation, or a negotiation 2.0, which could even be more protracted, or with the prospect that with the guillotine motion in Article 50, that Britain could simply stop the whole process and pull out? It's playground politics, it seems. But at the 23rd of June, we will have a decision, and then it'll be the decision will also be: does Britain lead within Europe, or does Britain take a back seat, hoping for reform? Thank you to all our guests today: Catherine Stihler, Jean Lambert, Mercedes Bresso, Martina Anderson, Luca Jahier, and Dora Francesco, and also for Martina Keller, our student from Poland, and Blanca Pinheiro from Spain. I'm Brian Maguire, and this is Euronet Plus.